Hi there and welcome along to another episode of A Serve of Leadership. My name is Ian Crawford, professional speaker, trainer and coach specialising in leadership and influence. And this guy standing right next to me, joining me once again, the world-renowned leadership coach and consultant, Ash Sluty. Welcome back, Ash. Here we go again.
Cross. How are you, champ?
I'm good, bud. Yourself?
Mate, really well, really well. Tell me what's been good in your week this week?
Work. People talking to me.
Hey, you sound surprised by that. People are talking with you all the time.
Well, yeah, okay, let's say this. They're talking to me and wanting to pay me to do it at some stage. So work is starting to crank up again. How about yourself? How's it all looking over your way?
Man, I've had a good week. Yeah, I've had a good week. In fact, the excitement of our week has been that my sister had twins this week.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. Congratulations.
2 baby girls.
Uncle Ash.
Uncle Ash again, yes, that's right. So these are, technically her second and third now. And everyone's all happy, healthy. And
good. That's the important one, huh?
Yeah.
So, mate, what are we going to talk about today?
Today, we're going to talk about some stuff that's been popping up in a few coaching sessions that I've had, where leaders have actually said, how do I become a more effective leader? Right? So actually, how do I just get better at my job of being a leader? What are the couple of things that I can focus on to improve that? We decided we'd have a bit of a look at that. Now, obviously, that is, tailored to each individual person, right? So it's going to be a little bit different. Certainly from the last number of years in particular, here's some common things that have come up for me during that time. So what do you reckon about that?
I think that is a good one.
Okay.
It is one of the common ones. Our leaders are always under stress and under pressure to perform. And one of the reasons they're not doing it is because they're not that effective in the delivery of their leadership. So you're right, it is a very common desire for leaders to talk about this one. So, mate, is it my turn or your turn to go first this week?
Oh, mate, certainly age before beauty.
I'm still not sure which one that is. All right, I'll just go first. How's that?
Okay.
So the first one is, my first tip to leaders to be more effective is to ask themselves, what does success look like? And that is very simple, but foundational to being effective is being able to answer the question, if I'm a successful leader, how will I know? What will I see my team doing? How would I know that I've been successful? Now, it's so foundational because everything else I make decisions after that comes back to this point. It comes from our friend Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, where he found highly effective, efficient people, in particular leaders, they always began with the end in mind. Now, like a lot of the stuff that we talk about in this, it sounds so obvious. But time and time again in either a training situation or in a coaching situation where I ask people, they say, oh, come and help us coach, be a better leader. No problems. One of the first questions I ask is, how will you know you're being successful as a leader? They usually pause and you can see them for the next 30 seconds, they're just grabbing words out of the air, making stuff up. I want this to be part of their DNA, that when they do get to a point where they need to make decisions of whether I need to do task A or task B, it comes back to this foundational conversation of what success looks like. Also, if we set up this in our mind about what success looks like and we really commit to it, I truly believe that subconscious brain starts moving us towards it. Sounds a simple tip, sounds straightforward, but very few leaders do it. And the key to it is detailed. I want good communication. I want commitment by my team is comments I get all the time. I want to be able to live it. I want to be able to see it, absolutely know and feel what the leader is feeling once they describe it to me. So there's my tip number 1. Always begin with the end in mind. What does success look like?
So a quick question for you there is, what's one of the things that you think helps people really boil that down to a clear picture of what success looks like? How do they go about doing that?
I call it tree time.
Tree time.
I don't want to be flippant about it, but this is something that keeps evolving as your experiences and knowledge as a leader continues. So if I'm a superintendent or a frontline leader for a while, and suddenly I put into middle management, I wouldn't expect them to know exactly what they want to be around successful the very first day. So I call it tree time, which means they've got to give themselves some time, quiet time, not when they're on the go, to go ask the question and just really analyze what they're saying to each other and be comfortable with refining it as they go on. This is not something that just appears. It's not something you're born with and evolves, and you've got to spend time thinking about it. Would be my suggestion.
Actually making the space for that kind of thinking.
Yeah. In your experience, do you think leaders are actually doing that?
Look, it's pretty difficult for them. So I think the very best leaders create time to do that. They actually make the time. They understand the importance of it. Whereas most leaders, we get pulled from pillar to post and get caught up sometimes in the day-to-day, and it can easily then slip out of the routine of things that people are trying to do.
I think this is also a really good one. If we really expand the definition of leadership into sporting clubs or coaches or parents, even, this is a really great one. What does successful parenting look like? What does successful sport coaching look like? How do I want to be remembered? All those sort of questions is a really powerful one to do. And the very few leaders that I've worked with that have done this exceptionally well, you can just tell. You can just tell as they wander through their day, how they respond to things, how they react to things. They just are very comfortable with that when things are even going bad or not the way they want, they just feel comfortable that they'll bring it back because they know where to bring it back to. Yep. Those leaders who don't do this process will get caught up in the day-to-day of, things are going bad, and they'll get caught up and they'll run with the emotion. Then they'll be exhausted and they'll come back, and as soon as they sit down, some other emotional response will be thrown upon them and away they go again. It's one of those intangible things that you can't put words to. You can just tell. Getting there is something very, very straightforward that they can do.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So what wisdom have you got for us?
Well, look, and I think it extends well off what you were talking about there. I was thinking about this a lot and trying to map back to a lot of the leaders that I've worked with and sort of extract out what I thought the very best were doing. And what has stood out for me is leaders' ability to think strategically. And I think that is a wonderful skill. And I think it piggybacks off your point really well. Mm-hmm. So if we say what is strategic thinking, it's ways of being able to look at things in sort of more of a broader and even longer perspective, right, than usual. So it's pulling yourself out of the day-to-day. It's allowing you to look at things through the lens of the bigger picture, through the lens of whether it's the business strategy or what that team goal is. That skill of strategic thinking is brilliant. Exactly as you've described, allows people look at things in context to not get caught in the day-to-day alien things, not get pulled always from pillar to post, because they're always able to realign as to what is important. What I want to point out in particular is that strategic thinking is not strategic planning. So a lot of people that we talk to go, okay, so do I need to go away for a couple of days and, really think about things and either get my leadership team together or get the whole team together to think about where we want to go? No, that is stuff that is critically important, but happens every now and then and is often, say, done by senior leaders. Strategic thinking is really something done by everyone, right? And really good leaders and really good teams find out not only how to do it themselves, but they teach others how to do it, because then it multiplies the impact of what happens. So I know that the question in your head there is, well, what are the pieces to helping to do that? I could just see it. It was bursting out on your lips there.
I'm sure I would have said it better, but...
Much better.
The intent is...
No question. Absolutely no question. There's probably 5 pieces for me. So number 1, get really good at challenging your assumptions. So whether that's assumptions at a team level, whether that's assumptions even at a department level, or assumptions on how we do things as a business, get really good at challenging those assumptions. And you do that by being curious. Is there a better way? Why do we do it this way? Those kind of things become really useful. So number 1 for me, challenge assumptions. Number 2, get good at identifying trends. Right? So look for patterns that are arising, and where you can challenge them or where you can make use of them in that side of things. And whether that is, again, within what's happening within your team or whether it's happening at a larger perspective. Thirdly, I'd say look for signs that point to opportunities or particular challenges coming your way. and take some time to think about the different outcomes that could possibly happen. So you're not always being surprised by things along the way, that you're actually getting the opportunity to almost kind of forward plan and to, have a few plan A, plan Bs in that perspective, which then means there's less surprises, right? You've often thought about things before they come. Number 4, when you take time to think, make sure you use those insights. So what does that mean? Decide what you're going to do and what you're going to focus on, and decide what you're not going to do, right? And I think the second part of that is probably equally important, but everyone forgets about. So we always say, okay, well, yeah, what do we want to focus on? But we don't actually stop to say, actually, what are we not going to focus on as well? The final little point, which I think resonates well with something that you mentioned before, is when we get caught into that day-to-day, that busyness, we lose the ability to think strategically. So making sure that you're taking regular breaks, that you are managing your own energy levels so that you don't automatically slip into that reactive mode, becomes really powerful in being able to engage in that strategic thinking piece. So they were things that came up for me that I thought would work really well in this piece.
I think then leads very nicely into my next point about setting priorities. And if we go way back to when you started talking about, the first point was about saying that they have to be strategic thinkers. There is going to be a point in their day where they're either consciously or subconsciously going to say, okay, where do I spend my time? Do I do it strategically or do I do it operationally and very tactically? The leaders need to make a decision at that fork in the road to which direction they go. Setting those priorities around what they should be doing is a really high thing on what I coach and what I talk about. The key to being able to have those conversations is to go to my first point about what success looks like, holding that really tight. And then when multiple opportunities come to them during the day, is going, okay, which activity, which task, which conversation am I going to take or put in place or do that allows me to lead to that, not what I want to do, or which one would I enjoy most, which one would be most exciting, which one leads me to that end point of success. So ultimately the leaders need to, again, in a quiet time, not in a busy time, that's a bad time to ask this question. What are things that I should be doing and shouldn't be doing that allows for my team to reach that end of success point and for me to be the leader I need to be?
So in terms of the that ability to be checking in, right, see how they are going, do you have a cycle that you work with people on around that, or do you have a routine that you get them on to be able to create that check-in stage of whether they are focusing on the right things?
Yeah, this comes back to something that you said 2 or 3 weeks ago in regards to doing some planning beforehand. So one of the really interesting things that I get my groups to do in particular is to write down all the tasks that they are called upon to do over a month, which is a big list. And then I get them to have a close look at that and go, okay, if you had to choose the top 5, not the top 5 that you like doing, the top 5 that gives us the biggest return on investment, the biggest impact on your team and the business, what would they be? And they go, they choose 5. And I say, great, choose 5, now number them. And they go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then we play around with it more, and we'll actually go to the opposite end, going, okay, what are the things that are just wasting time, you're just filling time, that don't make no impact in regards to your leadership impact and your impact on the business. And they identify that 5, and my first thing is get rid of it. Because that bottom 5 is usually stuff they can definitely get rid of and never do again, or more importantly, delegate off.
Delegate.
Yeah, so they got to get rid of it. So the next thing would be they rock up on Monday morning, they put their briefcase down, turn the computer on, get their coffee, because that's always essential.
Briefcase? Who carries briefcases these days? What world do you live in?
Very high, powerful leaders. Maybe I've just slipped into a movie of some description.
Back in the 50s, I think, yeah.
Leaders in the movies always carry briefcases. When they sit down and before they even check their emails, they will look at the top 5 things, and it can be 5, it's an arbitrary number, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, whatever it is, but I never say more than 10, because then it just gets too easy to start jamming stuff in. So let's say top 5, and I say, okay, you sit down before you start the day saying, okay, my highest priority is number 1, and they look at what the number 1 is. Now, sometimes I go, nope, don't need to do that today. Then they move on to number 2. Nope, don't need to do that today. Done that. It's only once a month, whatever it is. Number 3, that's what I've got to work on. Now, they then set off on that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if something new comes in, so you rush into my office, you bang on the door and go, hey, Cross, I need you to do this. My next decision is going, okay, I've got my top 5. Here's this new thing. Where does it sit? Now, sometimes it's going to be at number 1. It's going to trump everything that I've got to do it. In a perfect world, if the CEO walks into my office as a GM and said, Cross, I need you to do something, that becomes number 1 in a perfect world. Most times the CEO is working too low anyway. And you make a decision. So you've got in our framework of where it sits. If it doesn't sit in that top 5 or top 6 or top 7, you can turn around to the person and go, okay, here's what I'm going to do first, and then I'm going to get to you. Is that okay? Or I'm going to get to it on a Thursday or a Friday, whatever it's going to be. But you can then make a logical decision on where it sits rather than the emotional, because the human brain will go after the reactive emotional thing that just walked into my office more than the impact stuff.
Yeah.
And if we start getting around that, we start role modeling and we get other people below us to start doing that. Suddenly, this line of sight from CEO all the way to the apprentice who's arrived on work today, everyone is doing exactly what they need to do to make the greatest impact. And that helps from a team point of view, but in particular, what we're talking about today is leadership. It makes a massive difference.
And that's a great, simple little tip there. I like it.
Yeah.
Tell me what your third one is.
My third one? My third one is a little bit different to the first 2, is willing to be influenced. You know, one of the areas that I'm really interested in is how we get leaders more influential in regards to their communication and their influence and their presence. One of the really important things around being influential, and sometimes we forget when we talk about this, is also the ability to be influenced. And stereotypically, leaders are seen as these people who are all-knowing, they have all the answers, and have the ability to say the right thing at the right time in the right place. In this fast-paced, ever-changing, constantly surprising us world, there's very few leaders that have the ability to do that. And it's only probably leaders of really small businesses that could do that. They have the ability to, just look outside their office and see everything that's going on. But the desire to hear from other people, and more importantly from those people who have probably got more knowledge and expertise around the topic you're talking about than you, and being able to listen and have people challenge your view and ideas, building a culture where all the information is brought together to consider before making decision is a really important one. Now, there's going to be times when the leader just has to make snap decisions and they're going to be wrong. That's not what we're talking about every single time, but there's going to be important decisions that they need to make, that the leader needs more information, more guidance, more ideas, and we have to be okay with that. Because I don't judge leaders on the decisions they make. I judge leaders on the success that they have. So if someone else comes up with a better decision to get to that success, then so be it. Even the youngest people that are coming into our industries now, they give a very different point of view than me at my age group. They see things different, but I've got to be open to hear that, weave that into my knowledge and experience to get the very best decision. That can be a challenge for a lot of leaders because they perceive themselves as a font of all knowledge.
Well, and so let me take you back to your very first statement there around willingness to be influenced by others. So being that you're providing a wonderful free coaching session at the moment, explain to me some of the how around what you mean by willingness, because I think to me willingness was the really critical word there.
Well, it comes back to the 2 things that you said. Firstly, is leadership is a very conscious thing. Is really challenging those assumptions around the leader being the font of all knowledge. That the example we always use is the orchestra. The guy at the front twirling the baton isn't an expert in every single piece of instrumentation that's in front of them, but they're experts at bringing them together. And that's the equivalent, that if we want to be better at a violin solo, I'm not going to ask the conductor. I'm going to ask the person who plays the best violinist to give me some advice before I move them to where possibly they fit within the bigger organization. So consciously doing that and asking themselves, saying, well, how am I making that decision? Is it just an assumption or do I really know? Have I got all the information? I think great communicators and great influencers are based around the ability to ask great, you said this as well, great curious questions to themselves and to other people. For what reason am I thinking that? Where did I get that information? Why do I believe this? Things like that really opens you up consciously to go, okay, wait on a second, I'm just making an assumption. And that assumption is based on knowledge that I got 15 years ago. Now, I haven't stood next to that piece of machinery, or I haven't purchased $1 million truck in 30 years. How would I know what to do here? Et cetera, et cetera. So then saying, well, where can I find that information, and seeking out that information before I make that decision. And so it's about that consciousness, and also about challenging that assumption.
Yeah, absolutely. I really like your concept of curiosity there. I think that idea of curiosity, if leaders can challenge themselves to practice curiosity as regularly as possible, it really helps in those situations and maps back into, I guess, some of the ingredients I was talking about in the strategic thinking aspect, that idea of challenging your assumptions and also in particular understanding your biases that actually filter or set up these assumptions that you have, and being able to lean into them curiously and go, hang on a second, is this really the way that it is? And is this really what's going on? It reminds me of a wonderful comment by a lady called Margaret Heffernan. And if you haven't seen, she's done a couple of TED Talks, so it's really worth having a look at. And obviously, if I've mentioned this before, just edit it out. So Margaret Heffernan has this line in one of her TED Talks where, she's talking about teams and the power of teams. And it's that no idea is born fully formed. And knowing that even if a leader or another individual comes up with an idea, it's the conversations we have around it, it's the curiosity and the teasing out of it that actually turns that idea into something really powerful and practical in that sense. Links beautifully back into this idea of willingness to be influenced by others, and not standing as as you said, the font of all knowledge, but that confidence to be able to run off an idea meritocracy, right? Where we're just going to take the best idea and run with that, rather than thinking about, oh, okay, well, who came up with it, or does it have to be me? Things like that. So I think you've got, and I like the way that you've sort of summarised that piece well.
Thank you. So, mate, I've done a lot of talking today. It must be your turn again. What have you got for us?
Mate, I don't have anything else to add. I think you've really covered off a number of really key ingredients. I think they weave into my world of, or my skill of strategic thinking, and the elements that I broke down in there. So there's nothing for me to add. I think you've covered it off perfectly, mate.
So, we'll grace people with a short session today. How's that?
Perfect.
So if you missed out on our previous weeks and you would like to catch up, then click on the link below that will take you to our playlist in our YouTube and catch up and enjoy the other ones that we've done. If you have a topic or question that you'd like Ash and I to cover, then please contact us on the details below. Always a pleasure to chat with you, Ash.
Hey, thank you, Crofts. Pleasure was all mine.
And thank you to everyone else that's joined us today, and we will see you next week.